Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the County Council Caucus meeting, Monday, April 26th. It is a hybrid meeting, which means those of you who are looking on, that we have people in the council chambers as well as council members online. As I call your name, would you please let me know that you in fact are here? Councilman Cunningham.
Present.
Councilman Dawson.
Present.
Councilman Flewelling.
I'm here.
Councilman Glover.
Here.
Councilman Hervishon.
Present.
Councilwoman Howard.
Here.
Councilman Lawson is on his way. Councilman McKellen.
Here.
Councilman Rodman.
Here.
Councilman Somerville. Present. The chair is present. We do have all but one member in attendance right now. Would you all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Public notice of this meeting has been published, posted, and distributed in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. Would a member of the council please make a motion to approve the caucus agenda?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rodman makes the motion,
Mr. Chairman, I'll second.
and Ms. Howard makes the second. Is there any questions, concerns before we declare that this will be approved without objection? Seeing no objections, the agenda is now approved. Citizen comments. Is there anybody in the audience here who wishes to make a comment? No.
I have nothing worth saying.
Nothing worth saying. Is there anybody online?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We now will go to the agenda review. The discussion items for the agenda review will be those items that are on the county council meeting agenda. I will open the floor to any questions about the county council agenda meeting.
If I might, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Flewelling.
Thank you. I have a problem with item 19. Excuse me. Not number 19. Number 18, the change of form of government resolution, or I guess the referendum that we are voting on today. I think the wording of it is more than just disingenuous, sir. It makes it appear as if it is a negative motion. In other words, if you like it, you have to vote for it. Instead of making it like what you would normally expect out of a referendum is a vote yes is for change. And that's not what you have here. The way you've got it worded, a yes vote is for retaining the form of government. And I think that, quite frankly, I'm having so much trouble with it, sir. I think that I'm not sure that that it would stand legal scrutiny. I've never heard of a negative motion where a yes vote is to retain the form of government or anything like that. You see, you understand my problem, right?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. When we get to the, well, all right.
Kurt's from
Yeah, Kurt, do you want to weigh in, please?
Sir, thank you. Mr. Felling, the wording is precisely as required by the statute. The statute says you must give the voters the opportunity to retain the existing form of government, not merely saying, do you want to change? So it is worded precisely as required by state law.
Okay. I'll have to do some research on it then.
I'd be happy to talk to you some more about it.
Okay. Any other concerns about the agenda? Duly noted that Mr. Lawson has now arrived and we have every council members participating. There are no further concerns regarding the agenda. All right. Any new business to come before County Council?
Mr. Chairman, can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
For those of you who have been fortunate enough to have your vaccination, you'll receive a little vaccination card, looks like this. If you go to Staples, they will laminate it for you. They make a copy and laminate it for you. And it's quick and it's free. So just a suggestion for everybody.
Yep. Yes, and to that point, it is a document that you should keep secure because you never know when you will need it, especially if you are going to do future international travel. One of the other things that you may want to do is to take a picture of it and email it to yourself and put it on your computer, as well as have it on your personal cell phone. Okay, all right. No new business to come before us. May I have a motion for our executive session?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Somerville makes the motion for executive session. A
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dawson, you made the second? Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we will be entering into executive session without objection under South Carolina Code 30-4-70A2 for the receipt of legal advice where the legal advice relates to pending, threatened, or potential claims or other matters covered by the attorney-client privilege, settlement of legal claims, or the position of the public agency in any other adversary situations involving the assertion against the agency of a claim. This will be done without objection. I see no objections. Therefore, at 5:07, we will be entering into executive session, and upon exiting from executive session, we will determine if there needs to be any action taken. Okay? We're now back in session for the county caucus meeting. As a result of the executive session, there will be no actions taken as a result of what was discussed in the executive session. Is there any other citizen comments? Since we,
No, sir.
no other citizen comments. Therefore, seeing no other business, we will adjourn the caucus meeting and come back at 6 p.m. for the regular council meeting. Therefore, at 5:19, the caucus meeting is adjourned. Everyone, this is the County Council meeting of Monday, April 26th. It's 6 p.m. I would like to call this meeting to order. This is a hybrid meeting. Therefore, we have members of County Council in person and members who are online. As I call the roll, please let me know that you in fact are present. Councilman Cunningham.
Present.
Councilman Dawson.
Here.
Councilman Flewelling.
Present.
Councilman Glover.
Here.
Councilman Hervishon.
Present.
Councilwoman Howard.
Here.
Councilman Lawson.
Mark Lawson, present.
Councilman McKellen.
Present.
Councilman Rodman.
Present.
Councilman Somerville.
Present.
The chair is here. Therefore, we do constitute a quorum. Would you all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing? The invocation and allegiance will be done by Councilmember Cunningham.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for letting us meet tonight, Lord. We thank you for this opportunity to be able to be blessed to live in this country where we have that freedom and that right. We just pray that we continue to never take that for granted. As all of us are put in situations right now to make decisions, Lord, we pray that those decisions are made for the better of the community and done at your will. We pray for the family and the community in this area, Lord, that you continue to bless them and keep their hand on them, as well as the rest of this country, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Public notice of this meeting has been published, posted, and distributed in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. Would a member of council please make a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rodman makes the motion. May I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Somerville makes the second. Is there any questions or concerns about the agenda for this evening? Seeing none, the agenda will be approved without any objections. See no objections, the agenda has been approved. Next is the approval of the minutes of February 8th, 2021 and February 22nd, 2021. May I have a motion for those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Ms. Howard makes the motion. A second, please.
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Cunningham makes the second. Duly motioned and second. Are there any questions, comments, or corrections to the minutes as presented? Seeing none, the minutes will be approved without any objections. I see no objections. Therefore, the minutes are approved. Next on the agenda will be our administrator's report. Mr. Greenway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I've customarily done, and members of council, good evening. As I've customarily done, I've recognized employees at the beginning of my administrator's report each time I've been here in a meeting with you all. I'm going to skip the first two tonight because I was told that they would be here in person, but I do not see them in attendance. So I'm just going to do two this evening for the folks that are online with us. I don't want to deprive those folks that said they would be in here in person, the opportunity for you all to see them and for them to interact with you if they would want to do that. So our first employee tonight is Mr. Esau Brown. He is participating via Zoom. He works at our Hilton Head Island Airport in the aircraft rescue and firefighting. He's the senior aircrew rescue firefighting and operations management officer. He has been with us for 27 and a half years. And as the senior ARFF operations officer, Esau has responsibility for not only life safety and property safety as they relate to aviation, he also has the responsibility for ensuring the airport facility remains in compliance with the strict requirements of the FAA's Part 139 Airport Classification Program. The airport's records and facilities are inspected every year by FAA, and Esau leads our team that has ensured that the airport hits the marks every year for that particular report. When Chief Yeager retired over a year ago, John Rimbaud turned to Esau and asked him to lead the section as we worked out what we wanted as an organizational structure. Esau's dedication and heart made it an easy yes for him. I am so thankful and blessed to be able to work with Esau. He's one of the finest people I've ever known, and that's a quote from our airport director, Mr. Rimbaud. So this is probably one of the most unique things that I've had the pleasure of sharing. Esau, in addition to being a fire officer, operations officer for the airport, he is also a pastor, and he takes that responsibility very seriously. And he says that his mission in life is saving souls, be that at the airport or in the sanctuary at church. So I think that's a very unique thing. So let's give Esau a round of applause, please. Esau, I know you're online. Do you want to say anything real quick?
Yes, sir. Esau here. Just want to say thank you, sir, for the opportunity to be a part of this team, and it's a great honor and a privilege to be recognized by Mr. Rimbaud and the team at the airport. We pride ourselves on being a team. And everything I do, I try to make an impact in other folks' lives, and I'm glad that they recognize that. And so I thank you, sir, for this opportunity to be a part of the county. I've been there for 27 and a half years, and I'm planning on being there for a couple more years. So God will, and hopefully that'll be a great deal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Our next employee also was unable to attend. We do have a photo of him that they'll pull up. His name is Ron Lewis, and he works in our facilities maintenance and facilities management department. He has extra duty because he also has to put up with Mark Rosendahl every day in addition to his job. So anyway, he's an electrician. He's been employed with us since July of 2017. Of course, as an electrician, Mr. Lewis performed a wide range of duties to include installation and repair of high voltage electrical components to HV equipment, LED retrofitting to building lighting fixtures, and the installation and repairs to low voltage network wiring. I think I actually saw him out in the parking lot today working on lights out there. As a member of our emergency call team, Mr. Lewis will also conduct duties outside of his experience as an electrician to make plumbing and construction repairs as needed. His high level of attention to detail and positive attitude make him a pleasure to work with. Something unique about Mr. Lewis to share publicly, he has been married to his wife Chris for 31 years. That's very remarkable. And they both have a passion and love for their two hound dogs, Kimber and Molly. So let's give him a round of applause. Thank you. Then I have three announcements. One to inform council something I've recently approved. The Friends of Fort Fremont had an opportunity to apply for a grant under the 2021 Federal Historic Preservation Grants Program that would help fund a structural engineering survey of the batteries at Fort Fremont, which is a property owned by Beaufort County and is operated as a passive park. Many of you know that we are underway on building an interpretive center out there at Fort Fremont, and that will be opening the summer of 2021. Can you pull up these pictures for me, Brennan? The other thing that I want to inform everyone of this evening is that today, just today, Secretary Christy Hall from South Carolina DOT joined several people on a very new bridge here in the county. And that bridge is the Harbor River US 21 bridge. And there was the ribbon cutting in there today, so you can see that we have a nice, clean structure. If you're not familiar where this is the bridge that replaces the very narrow two-lane bridge that goes over from St. Helena out to Fripp and over to Harbor Island. And also Councilmember Somerville, Councilmember Mr. Glover, we're all there. You can see Secretary Hall there in the picture, Senators Campson, and the representative from Mr. Rivers from the area. And that's everyone lined up there to cut the ribbon. So I have a piece of that in my pocket somewhere, so that'll be a treasured possession. But I was also had the opportunity to be one of the first people to drive over that bridge today on the way off after the ribbon cutting. So it's very, very nice bridge, very good work by DOT and Triplet engineering firm that built the bridge. And then I also want to thank all the employees who participated in our Earth Day celebration. That was part of my weekly report to you all. But we collected 12,280 pounds or 6.14 tons of litter. And 131 county employees participated from many departments. Some of our council members were there. I think they were dodging snakes, and I'm not going to tell you what your clerk of council was doing with the tequila bottles that she picked up, but anyway, that's beside the point. So, anyway, that concludes my report. Thank you.
I have come from the dais down here because I have the pleasure tonight for item number 7, which is reading a proclamation that is going to be presented to the Beaufort County Detention Center for Correction Officers Week. So is someone going to join me? All of them.
There you go.
Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely.
What do you feel safe?
Yes, I am protected now. Okay, everybody's here?
Yes, sir.
Whereas in 1987, Congress passed and President Ronald Reagan signed Public Law 99-611, proclaiming the first week of May as the National Correction Officers Week. And whereas the operation of correctional and detention facilities represents a crucial component of our criminal justice system, and whereas correctional officers play a vital role in protecting the rights of the public to be safeguarded from criminal activity, and whereas correctional personnel are responsible for the safety and dignity of human beings charged to their care, and whereas correctional personnel work under demanding circumstances and face danger in their daily work lives, often sacrificing personal and family time to provide a necessary but thankless, unrecognized, and behind-the-scenes service to the public. And whereas the staff of the Beaufort County Detention Center has continually demonstrated their skill and professionalism in running one of the finest facilities in the state. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Beaufort County Council proclaims May 2nd through May 8th National Correction Officers Week, dated this day, 26 April 2021, signed by myself as County Council Chairman. Congratulations.
Thank you. I would like to say thank you to all of you for believing in us, and we couldn't do what we do without you. Also, I would like to say that 2020 was hard for all of us, but we managed to get through it. Our facility is one out of just a few facilities in the state of South Carolina with 0 cases of COVID in our general population area. And we would like to do that. We could not have done it without the fine job of all these men and women standing here today. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Let's take one more photo with everybody together. Yeah, so we can have everybody from council behind us. I'll look like one of the prisoners.
Or 2 cheeseburgers.
Cheeseburger.
All right.
Thank you.
So what you do? The next item on our agenda is going to be a presentation from Barbara Johnson from the Lowcountry Council of Governments on the annual consolidation plan.
Good evening.
Good evening, Barbara.
Hi, I'm sorry, but my video is not working. Usually it's my microphone, but tonight it's my video. But I am here to present the consolidated plan The Beaufort County Low-Country Regional Home Consortium has prepared the 2021 Consolidated Plan, and the plan is in the comment period, which ends April 30th. The Consolidated Plan is a 5-year plan required by HUD. This public hearing has been duly advertised. The purpose of the Consolidated Plan is to provide information on housing and community development needs, to describe the current strategies adopted to meet those needs, and to raise awareness about housing and community development issues. We have adopted the following objectives as priorities for the next 5 years: rehabilitation of substandard housing, increase accessibility to adequate and affordable housing, support the development of safe, decent, and affordable housing, support housing initiatives to address homeless persons, persons with special needs, and the elderly, to provide economic development opportunities, and to promote the development of viable communities. The Consolidated Plan is carried out through annual action plans. There is no board approval or action required for the Consolidated Plan. However, we welcome your questions and comments at this time. Thank you.
Are there any questions from members of council? Seeing none, we thank you very much for your presentation, Barbara, and we always look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Our next item is the US 278 Independent Review final presentation. Jared, you're going to begin that?
Yes. First, I just want to thank you for the opportunity on this. This is a very important project to the region. It's a $250 million, so a generational project, to say the least. This is something that got started back in August of 2020 when members of the citizens of the local area got together and petitioned to county council and town council that an independent engineering consultant be hired and a review of the corridor design be studied to ensure it meets the needs and goals of the community. As you recall, there was a lot of discussion regarding this. It went back and forth several times between county and staff and Senator Davis and many others. And finally, a final scope was determined and awarded in November to HDR for a 60-day contract to study this area, study the corridor and the current design. In accompanying the contract with HDR, a committee of 7 members made up of 1 county staff, 1 town staff, 2 Hilton Head citizens at large, 2 Stony community members, and 1 member from Jenkins Island to establish the oversight committee to lead and direct the consultant. So a notice proceed was given in January, and the first meeting was commenced on the 19th of January. We held 6 meetings, with our first meeting, with our last meeting ending this morning as a debrief of the final report. And even though it took a little bit longer than our targeted 60-day timeline, we felt it was worthwhile to ensure that all the needs were met and that it was a thorough process and that all the ideas and comments from the committee were brought forth and looked at and analyzed. Also, in addition to on the extended timeline, we did coordinate with DOT, and they have agreed to push back their planned public hearing to later in the summer to ensure that the independent review was completed and that they have an opportunity to review the recommendations of the report and incorporate that into their final hearing. So with that, I will turn it over to our consultant, HDR, Philip Hutchinson, to go over the final report.
Okay. Thank you, members of council and Jared and his staff for letting us present tonight. I have myself and Jeff Clayton as well, who helped out and participated in all the oversight committee meetings with us tonight. And just want to say we have enjoyed working with the staff and the interactions with the oversight committee and just listening to their concerns. And we know it's an important project for everybody, that this project is the best it can be. So due to the fact that we presented to council last month, I believe it was, we're just going to start out with a review quickly of the items that we analyzed before we go into our recommendations. So you may remember the first couple of slides we have. So next slide. There we go. So we started early by requesting as much information from DOT as they have for the project, as well as gathering information and looking on their public website for the information you can see on the screen. Following that, as Jared mentioned, we started meeting with the Oversight Committee back in January, and that meeting was every other week until as of this morning when we had our final wrap-up session. So next. So after meeting with the Oversight Committee, starting to understand their concerns, we focused on these key questions you can see on the screen. These were from council, and they're listed in our scope of services. These questions, they first focused on the projected growth and the growth rates that DOT presented. Then safety of vehicles and pedestrians for any alternatives developed or any concepts developed. And then looking at additional alternatives outside what they have studied. So next slide. So we reviewed all the alternatives that DOT studied. We reviewed the growth rate analysis and information that was given from that, as well as all the crash data for 5 years along the corridor, and as well as available funding for construction. And then next slide. So we used all that information that we studied to date, and we considered new concepts along 278 through Jenkins and the Stony Island community, including free-flowing traffic, grade-separated interchanges, reversible lanes, frontage roads, and some combination of those alternatives. We looked at impacts to local neighborhoods in regard to traffic patterns while trying to minimize the rerouting and travel time of the local community, as well as property impacts. And then we took a look at the bike and pedestrian safety along 278, not only in the neighborhoods, but due to potential increased volume as the multi-use pathway is extended from Hilton Head over to Bluffton. And then lastly, we looked at the character of the road as it relates to the speed and the landscaping and just the character of Hilton Head. So all that review and analysis can be seen in the report, and I believe that is in your package. So as we go to the recommendations, there are a lot of alternatives considered for construction, and it appears that the most likely and the least impactful alternative that DOT is looking at is widening the existing 278 on the east side of the bridges. So with that, our recommendations focus mainly east of the bridges, but we did want to briefly point out that we looked at the concept of having another entrance onto Hilton Head other than US 278 that can be evaluated in the future. This is an idea that was brought up by multiple members of the Oversight Committee based on the people that they're representing. And this is something that's probably necessary in the future, not just for congestion mitigation, but even for emergency situations, because 278 is obviously the only road on and off the island. So we do understand that there have been discussions about that in the past, but it has not been funded or been placed in a long-range plan yet. So with that, with our recommendations first, in regards to signal timing, the existing signals on 278 have like 4 or 6 or 8 phase timing, which basically means vehicles going in multiple directions receive their own green time at individual times. And based on our study with the amount of traffic that we're seeing on 278 and forecast to see, it'll begin to back up traffic signals if they have more than 2 phases or maybe in 3 phases in limited instances beyond the phase given to the 278 traffic. Therefore, I think our first recommendation would be to utilize 2-phase signals. And keeping in mind that this is not something that's unusual phasing plan. This is used in states all over the country. So secondly, next slide. When we're looking at safety, so this quarter had a large number of rear-end accidents as well as angle accidents. So the rear-end accidents are typically a sign of congestion, which may partially be solved by just widening 278, which is what is moving forward with. And then angle crashes are typically caused by making turns. And you can see on the board the conflict points that are typical. So by using alternative intersection types, such as a 2-phase signal that we just mentioned, and the example that's shown on the slide there, you can reduce the conflict points. And this is particularly of concern in the Squire Poke and Spanish Wells area. So we have included that recommendation as well. So to the next slide. Based on conversations with the Oversight Committee, there are several key questions that have been asked and maybe not answered directly by DOT as the alternatives are being analyzed. But to note, DOT is following the NEPA process, and we do anticipate some of these answers will be given at the public hearing when they show the preferred alternative. But we do have several key items that came out in conversation with the Oversight Committee that will help the public evaluate the alternatives. These items include the cost for each alternative and as well as each intersection concept. In addition, the level of service gradient scale that a lot of traffic engineers use, including Jeff and myself, is still somewhat confusing. It uses an A through F grading scale, which is actually a little different than your typical grading scale in school. So we think travel time analysis would be a better solution to show the public in terms of how much time they would be saving along these alternatives with any alternatives that may come about. And this is somewhat of a complex analysis to do that, which we weren't able to complete for the alternatives for this review, but DOT should be able to look into that. So the next slide. One other item that came out from the Oversight Committee is the change in existing speed limits from 55 on the bridges to 50 on Jenkins Island to 45 mile an hour through the Sterling community, as well as the need to limit the speed limit through this area. So based on the proposed use of the road, including the fact that we'll have sidewalks and multi-use paths, 45 miles an hour is an appropriate speed limit through the corridor, and that's what we will be recommending moving forward. So the next slide. So as we mentioned before, we gave some attention to the bikes and pedestrians, both the increased volumes that are anticipated, as well as the need to keep the Stony community connected. That neighborhood is now designated as a traditional cultural property, and that's better defined in the report as well. And so as you know, the town of Hilton Head has the award-winning paths there that have proven to be safe and effective on the island. And so what we're recommending is similar criteria to those pathways that would include the color of the pathway as well as the width of the sidewalk, as well as the distance from the travel lanes. So those are recommendations for sidewalks. So going to the next slide. We talked about the character of the roadway in the Oversight Committee meetings, and this is a key as you're looking at the entrance to Hilton Head, as making the drivers aware that they're entering Hilton Head and their adjacent communities and there are pedestrians along the side of the road. During our study, the town did hire a land planning firm to help with recommendations that they can give insight to on what the land uses are in that area, what the landscaping should be, just the overall feel and character of the road. And we have talked and coordinated with that firm already as part of this study. So they are up to date on the work we've done as well as what they've done. And then our last slide, lastly, the Oversight Committee has kind of brought to our attention several areas outside of the 278 right-of-way that could change due to this project. And we have investigated several of the locations to improve the overall traffic patterns of the local community, which might not be directly related to the project. So some of these locations we feel are better served to have a county and town control over those locations if the resources are available. This would allow the local roads to be more context sensitive in the area to allow local staff and local engineers to design those connections. As you can see on the slide, the parallel route north of 278, maybe connecting Squire Pope and Wild Horse Road, as well as maybe an extension of Chamberlain over to Spanish Wells. Those are more local roads that could, in fact, improve traffic in the area just to get local traffic off and not leaving US 278. So all of these recommendations are included in your package. We feel like the Oversight Committee in this report was very comprehensive and covered a lot of subject matter and answered a lot of several key questions that were brought up. But as you can see in the recommendations, there's still some items that requires DOT's attention. And I think we've outlined those in the recommendation. So with that, we conclude our report, and I just wanted to note that we very much enjoyed working with the Oversight Committee and Jared and his staff through this, and I think this is a good report that we've put together.
Thank you for that report. Now, Jared or Phil, what are the next steps that you are required to take? You've presented the final report to us. I assume that you're going to present this also to Hilton Head?
Yes, so we have a planned meeting to make this same presentation to Hilton Head Town Council on Monday the 3rd of next week. And then from there, the ball is really in County Council and Town Council's court. Our suggestion would be that we provide correspondence to DOT, we, the county, or county council in a letter format, asking them to review the report and recommendations that are provided within the report and provide response back to us, the county and town, in regard to the report. So that would be our recommendation, but it would be for you guys to give us that direction.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you. Are there any comments to be made by any member of County Council? Mr. Harvishon.
Thank you. Just a question, but last time we had a update on this process, there were a number of concerns that came from the committee itself. I just would like some assurance that those have been adequately addressed and everything's okay with them.
I feel like we have made those. We had, I believe, 2 meetings since then. Also, for that draft report, after the midterm presentation that was made to council, shortly thereafter, we had a draft final report, and we had a lot of good comments provided by the committee members. And then the consultant HDR put a lot of time and effort into those responses, and that was what we coordinated on this morning to ensure that those were answered appropriately. There was 1 or 2 small comments, but overall it seemed the sense was that everybody was satisfied with the report as provided.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. McCallum?
Yeah, hey Jared, on the last page, there are additional areas of study for potential improvements. There's a couple of suggestions about Wild Horse Road, Gumtree Road intersection improvements, Old Wild Horse Road intersection improvements. It appears that those recommendations have been made to SCDOT, to the county, or the town to conduct further study on that. When those recommendations were made, were they more specific, or were they just general recommendations for someone else to decide what to do there?
So, and Philip, you can feel free to jump in. So those recommendations, there's some exhibits that go along with those recommendations in the full report.
Right.
DOT, I believe, is probably looking at some of those already, but basically they are a little open-ended as far as what needs to happen, whether it needs to be, in the case of Wild Horse and Gumtree, does that need to be an improved T intersection or a roundabout? There's still some determination of what that needs to be. It just needs to be further studied and evaluated, but there could be room for additional improvements off the main line, which would support the main line improvements that we're making today.
Yeah, well, Wild Horse and Gumtree, where those two intersect, really aren't related to the 278 issue. And you may remember I sent you an email about Squire Pope entering onto 278 and the congestion that was there. I don't see that as a suggestion to be further studied yet. You indicated to me that there was some consideration being extended to reconfiguring that intersection. Has that been part of the independent study review?
Philip, you wanna answer that?
Yeah, so depending on what intersection configurations are done at 278 and Wild Horse, and also 278 and Squire Pope. Yeah. So there's some potential to move traffic and minimize left turns. Right. So if you minimize left turns at Squire Pope, you would put them on Wild Horse, which would mean more traffic would be using Wild Horse. Right. So from our coordination with the town, that intersection with Wild Horse and Gumtree seems to be fairly busy right now, and adding additional traffic could mean some potential modifications, whether that be some turn lanes or a signal from that. But we kind of left that on DOT because they, depending on which one they use, they would know how much additional traffic would be using Wild Horse Road at that point.
Yeah, so if we're going westbound on 278, that dump from Squire Pope into westbound 278 has always been an issue because there's no real access lane for a gradual entry onto 278. Is that part of the consideration here? Westbound.
Yeah, westbound, from which?
Squire Pope onto 278.
Mm-hmm.
There's a light there, and the traffic backs up 20, 30 cars at a time. When they make that right turn, they have to go into one of the lanes of traffic. There's no merge lane there, is what I'm trying to say. So I don't see that here anywhere.
Yeah, so that is a part of the two-phase signal configuration. So when people are turning left onto Squire Pope from eastbound 278, they'll be able to turn right and go right westbound onto 278. So from eastbound 278 on the Squire Pope, they would go at the same time as the westbound onto 278. So they should have their own signal phase, actually.
Yeah, they'll have a phase, but they'll still be entering the two lanes of traffic that are backed up. So there's no way for that traffic to move, is what I'm trying to say. I don't want to beat this to death, but if the traffic's backed up, there's nowhere for those cars to go unless they have a merge lane. And at least that 4 or 5 cars could make the turn and reduce some of that line that's going back up to that traffic circle. But I don't see this here anywhere. Jared, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the merge, merging is a good thing and a bad thing all at the same time from the traffic world. So I think what Phil is trying to describe is the merge is not the key component. the amount of green time for that right turn movement is going to be increased with a two-phase signal versus the current signal, because it is going to be synchronized with another movement. Versus today, there's a very limited green time for that right turn that you're describing, and then they're forced to merge with a yield. And that stop condition with the yield, there's not enough gap in the westbound through traffic, and that's why the stack occurred. So the two-phase signal gives more opportunity for that clearing of that right turn.
Okay, I don't want to take up any more of the council time. I'll give you a call on that because it's a concern for constituents that are there, and I don't see it being addressed to my satisfaction with an adequate explanation just yet. So I'll talk to you about it privately. Okay, thanks, and thank you very much, Phil. I appreciate what you've done here. Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Mr. Rodman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I might just share a couple of comments, having followed this for some period of time. As you remember, there'd been a lot of concern for many months that something like this was needed. Council stepped forward. We did it with the encouragement of Senator Davis, who we continue to thank, particularly for his lead in getting the State Infrastructure Bank money. My take on this is that it was very professionally done by HDR. I think Jared did a great job of leading, and I think the oversight piece that was put in place, worked. It was an opportunity to make sure that the community, was being heard in the overall process. This is something actually that probably goes beyond what would normally happen in a project of this type, but I think it was needed and well executed. There were a large number of issues that were on the table that were resolved. I won't go back through and repeat what HDR has mentioned, but I will comment on two. One had to do with the growth rate, which they verified was reasonable, and that regardless of how you look at it, it will require 6 lanes on the bridges and at least a minimum of 6 lanes through the more congested areas. The interesting part is that even if the growth rate was lower, you'd still need the 6 lanes. In fact, some people would argue that we're at the point where we need the 6 lanes now. So that was a big concern of a lot of people, and I think that's been put to bed. I think the second one that was big was whether or not following the current roadway, the current alignment was the right thing to do, and I think they've spoken eloquently to that. They looked at other alternatives. Clearly, what was known as alternatives 5 and 6, which kind of went off the alignment, don't seem to work because they basically have twice the impact on relocations, twice the impact on wetlands, and cost $100 million more. So I think there were a lot of issues that got put to bed. Didn't really get into the bridges, but I haven't heard any pushback on the bridges, and we'll see what what they come up with. But I think most people believe that it's probably going to be a new set of bridges. I was pleased to read the part on Jenkins Island, where there seems to be everybody kind of moving toward 2 things. One, to the extent possible, use what's known as the connection under the bridges that's there today that allows kind of a grade separation for the limited amount of traffic that we have. And secondly, there's a lot of town-owned land on the north side, which would probably be required as a construction lane anyway, and that can become perhaps a service road in total. So, and the Jenkins Island folks, Windmill Harbor folks, seem to be pleased with what they're hearing. On the Stony piece, the guys have mentioned quite a few things that they have suggested as recommendations. As I reflected on the report, my first reaction was, well, gee, they didn't really give us that project, what the solution is. And the more I thought about it, I think where they ended up was a very professional place to be, and that was, they're not the design team, they're reviewing it. The design team still has exercises to go through, but they've pointed out a series of things that ought to be considered in those designs. So all in all, I thought it was a very effective way to approach that. So I say well done. Hopefully the questions of the community have been answered. I don't hear anybody arguing that they haven't been answered. As Jared mentioned, I think there's a meeting with the town next week. I think the fact that the land planning exercise is occurring through that community, that'll be an interesting input as DOT plans their final design. But the key to the whole thing is safety, congestion, and the community, not in any particular order. So we'll see what they come up with. But all in all, Mr. Chairman, I thought it was a job well done.
Yes, well done. Any other final comments? Mr. Cunningham?
Yeah, I just have one question. Jared, if I overlooked this, I apologize if you're repeating yourself. I know at one point a couple months ago, we talked about during this project if we were going to look at, I think it's called Oakity Boulevard Center and 170. It's that intersection where people can turn left or turn right in a turn lane. I know at one time we talked about looking to see if we need to close that off to stop the left turn because of the amount of wrecks are happening there. Do you remember what road I'm talking about?
Yeah, you're talking about a R-cut where they can make the turn at the same time in the median.
Yeah, so, and what's happening is that right lane's backing up and they're stopping for people to come across, but the left lane is continuing to go. And that's where people are getting T-boned. Is that involved in this project at all, or would that have to be a separate project because it's on 170? Yeah, it's like right there at that intersection.
Yeah, that's at 170 and 278 in Bluffton. That's a separate project.
Okay, I just wanted to double check.
That's something to be discussed in a later action item, or consent agenda item later in the meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
I see no other further comments. Therefore, thank you very much for the, I'm sorry, Mr. Hervachon.
Yeah, thank you. Just one real quick one, because I'm curious. The current funding set aside, is there any concern about whether or not that will be sufficient given where we are economically and with construction costs and everything that's going on there?
Everything that we have today, and as the current designs are developed, the funding that's in place is sufficient. However, per your questions and looking forward, I think there's probably opportunities for us to continue to search out funding opportunities to ensure ourselves we don't run into any further funding complications. If the design changes or if construction prices rises or if inflation rises, we still have a long time for the finished build. So I don't think we should quit searching for funding opportunities. But as of today, we are sufficiently funded.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
One more question. And
Mr. Lawson.
yes, thank you. And Jared, this is probably more of a comment. I know that this has gone through many times, but we were wrong back in 2011 or 2010 when it came to the average daily traffic. How do we address that if we're wrong again this time? Again, I don't think there's a right answer to it, but just kind of curious. That's the one thing that keeps jumping out at me. And I know it's gone through with the report and everything else, but just what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I understand that's a good cause for concern. So since then, the model has been updated. Again, a model is not an accurate depiction of real life, but it's the best that we have to design from. So that model has been upgraded with all the latest information that we have to plug in there in traffic counts. Yeah. The traffic counts that are being used are pre-COVID traffic counts, actually just before COVID, so they actually work out nicely in regards to planning efforts. And they modeled those, they interpreted those traffic counts back to the model. So we can never design something that's completely foolproof, but we're designing to the best information that we have available.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just one quick question for Jared.
Yes.
Yeah, he mentioned presenting to Hilton Head Town Council. What date is that, and what time would that be? And is that to full council, or is it to a committee?
It is May 3rd at 10 o'clock, so a week from today, I believe. And I believe it's a special meeting of full council. I don't know if it's a.
Would it be done virtual or?
Yes, sir.
And I need to request a special invitation?
It should be done just for similar to ours, but if you like to participate in the meeting, that would be a special request.
No, I just want to be a part of, that's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, everyone. All right, we're going to move on to item number 10, which is a discussion and presentation of the comprehensive annual financial report for 2020 by our external auditors, Maudlin and Jenkins, CPAs, and advisors. And Whitney, do you wish to introduce David?
I certainly can. It would be my pleasure. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I have the privilege of introducing Mr. David Irwin. He was the managing partner in charge and managing partner with Maudlin and Jenkins, who is the firm that has historically conducted our external annual audit as required by state statute. With no further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. Irwin. Thank you.
All right. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, David, we can.
Okay, good. Well, again, good evening. Hope you all are doing well. My name is David Irwin. I'm with Maudlin Jenkins. I was the partner who oversaw this year's audit of the county's financial statements, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here to discuss with you the results of this year's audit. I hate that I wasn't able to be there in person, but God willing, hopefully things will soon return to normal, and I can be there in person for next year's presentation. I believe you all have already received a copy of the financial statements. So the purpose of this evening's presentation is to provide you all an overview of our independent auditor's report, hit a few of the financial statement highlights, talk about the results of the compliance reports that we issue in conjunction with your audit, discuss some information that the auditing standards requires that we communicate to you all, and to answer any questions that you all may have. Now, the financial statements themselves, they are the responsibility of county's management and members of the county council. As your independent external auditors, our responsibility is to issue an opinion on the statements. We conducted our audit in accordance with governmental auditing standards and generally accepted auditing standards. And I'm happy to say that we are issuing a clean or unmodified opinion on this year's report. This is what you want. This is the highest level of assurance that we can provide as your external auditor. What this means is that, in our opinion, the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. I mentioned this to the Finance Committee last week when I spoke with them, but I also wanted to communicate this with you all and just thank your staff for their hard work. Due to a variety of factors, this year's audit obviously came with its own unique set of challenges. Whitney arrived at the county in October. So we were auditing the fiscal year that ended 3 months before she was even hired. But nevertheless, it was still her responsibility as the new CFO to oversee the audit and to make sure that we were provided with everything that we needed. And when you also factor in the pandemic, obviously, and also the numerous staff departures that occur throughout the year, and the institutional knowledge that left with those departures, Whitney, Hayes, their staff, they really did an excellent job under, again, some very unique and unusual circumstances. They were very accommodating to our audit team. They worked hard to address all of our questions and get us everything that we needed in order to get the audit finalized by the state's extended deadline. So, again, a special thank you to them. Their hard work was very much appreciated this year. Now for a overview of your financial statements, you all prepare what is called a comprehensive annual financial report, otherwise known as a CAFR. Now, a CAFR requires the inclusion of additional information that goes above and beyond the financial statement reporting process. This document is submitted annually to the Governmental Finance Officers Association, otherwise known as GFOA, where they put it through a pretty stringent review process. They have a professional staff that looks at your report, as well as a special review committee. When they look at your CAFR, their goal is not to assess the financial health of the county, but rather they want to make sure that the readers of your financial statements have the information available in this report to be able to do so themselves. And through this review, the GFOA has once again awarded the county the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And that is for fiscal year 19. And that certificate is included in this year's report. And I believe this is the 11th year in a row that you all have received the certificate. So again, congratulations to you all on that. This is a very impressive document and one that you all should be proud of. As you look through the financial statements, one section I always like to point out is the Management's Discussion Analysis, otherwise known as the MD&A. This begins on page 4 of your financial statements. It's right after our audit opinion. And if you get the chance, I would strongly encourage you to read this section. It's only 15 or so pages long. It's written by management, and it really does a good job of introducing and summarizing the basic financial statements, as well as providing an analytical overview of the financial activities that occur throughout the year. There's also quite a bit of comparative information in this section that discloses financial activity for both fiscal years 20 and fiscal years 19. So, to me, that adds a lot of value to the reader. It gives you a much better understanding of the good, the bad, the ugly of the current year activity when you have the prior year numbers there to compare it to. So, again, when you look at your report, I can certainly understand you all not wanting to read all 200 pages of this document cover to cover. But if you can, a good alternative is to read the MD&A. Now, the county's basic financial statements are broken up into 3 components. The first of which is your government-wide financial statements. Now, the government-wide statements, they provide a broad view of the county's operations in a manner similar to what you would see in a private sector business. All of the county's funds are combined under either governmental activities or business type activities. And this slide just gives you, again, some financial highlights of the government-wide financial statements. As you can see, the county ended the year with assets and deferred outflows of resources of approximately $845 million. Of that amount, around 573 are capital assets, net of accumulated depreciation. You all also had around $366 million in liabilities and deferred inflows of resources, which resulted in an ending net position of around $478 million this year. And that's an increase of about $66.6 million compared to prior year. When you look at your revenues, they were around $262 million this year. That's around $47 million higher than fiscal year 19. This is really the result of the $45 million in sales tax revenue that was collected in FY20. Expenses, they were comparable to prior year. They increased by about $5 million. They were around $195 million as of fiscal year 20. And one thing to keep in mind, net position is not what you all have in the form of cash to spend as you see fit. Net position is merely the difference between assets and liabilities, only a portion of which is cash on hand. So, again, this is the financial highlights of the government-wide statements. That being said, this is really the only time you'll see the county's financial activities reported in this manner. In the day-to-day operations of the county, the focus is more so on the individual funds themselves, which brings me to the second component of your financial statements, and those are the fund level statements. Again, this is what you typically see throughout the year. This component focuses on individual parts of the county, and it reports your operations in more detail than that of the government-wide statements. And when you talk about all the different funds of the county, a primary interest to you all is the general fund. It's the main operating fund of the county, and therefore accounts for the majority of your revenues received and funds expended. We have a couple of charts in these next 2 slides that breaks down the general fund's revenues and expenditures for the year. Total revenues of the general fund around $137.9 million. That's an increase of about $2.2 million compared to prior year. Obviously, as you look at this chart, the vast majority of the general fund's revenues are derived from property taxes. And that totaled around $107 million this year. And that represented approximately 78% of the total revenues for the general fund. A couple other significant revenue sources worth noting here. You all had charges for services of around $14.2 million and intergovernmental revenue of approximately $9.5 million for the year. This chart presents the general fund's expenditures for the year by major function. Your total expenditures were around $123 million. which was an increase of about 3.6 million compared to prior year. As you would expect, public safety, public works, and general governmental expenditures, they represent the majority of these expenditures. Public safety, as you can see, was around $49 million for the year, and that accounted for approximately 40% of the general fund's total expenditures. And that percentage is actually on the lower end of what we typically see with local governments of your size. Public works expenditures were just under $16 million for the year, and general governmental expenditures were right at $37.2 million, both of which were consistent with prior year. The chart on this slide shows the fund balance history of the general fund over the past 5 years. It's always interesting to me to kind of reflect back on where you were and compare it to where things currently stand. And as you can see on this chart, it was a relatively good year for the general fund. Fund balance increased about $10.5 million for an ending balance of $53.8 million for the year. Again, as I mentioned earlier with net position, fund balance is not what you all have in the form of cash for discretionary spending. Fund balance, again, is merely the difference between assets and liabilities, only a portion of which is available cash. Additionally, another thing to keep in mind, the general fund incurs expenditures of a little over $10 million per month. So you all ended the year with unassigned fund balance equal to around 4.5 months of operating expenditures. With you all having a June 30 year end, it's imperative that you all have a strong fund balance in order to cover the expenditures of the months through July through November when your revenues are typically down. One further thought on that, the GFOA, which again is where you submit your CAFR for certification, depending on the entity's year end, they recommend that entities maintain a fund balance somewhere between 3 to 6 months worth of general fund operating expenditures. So again, as I mentioned earlier, you're right at 4.5 months as of June 30. So you're right in line with GFOA's recommendation. And again, as you can see on this chart, you all have done a good job, especially over the past 2 years, of getting your fund balance up to that recommended level. So congratulations to you all on that. A couple of other funds I briefly want to mention are the county's 3 enterprise funds, which are the stormwater utility, the Ladies Island Airport, and the Hilton Head Island Airport. Now again, enterprise funds, they're used to account for operations in a manner similar to that of a private sector business. The goal of these funds are to be self-sufficient and to generate sufficient operating revenues to cover their operating expenses. So the chart on this slide shows the operating revenues and expenses for each of these 3 funds. As you can see, the Stormwater Utility Fund, they did have a good year. It ended the year with operating income around $2.1 million. The Ladies Island Airport was flat. It had a slight operating loss of around $8,000. And the Hilton Head Airport had operating income of a little over $1 million for the year. When you factor in the non-operating revenues and expenses that these funds have, as well as the significant amount of capital contributions that the Hilton Head Airport receives, you can see on this slide the net effect of each fund's net position compared to prior year. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the Ladies Island Airport Fund was flat for the year. Stormwater Utility had an increase in net position around $2.1 million, and the Hilton Head Airport's net position increased a little over $4 million for the year. But again, one thing to keep in mind, of that $4.1 million increase, $3.1 million came from capital grants, capital contributions in the form of federal grants. So about $1 million of that pertained to the operating income that I talked about. The third and final component of the county's financial statements are the footnotes. Now, the footnotes disclose the county's accounting methods, as well as provide an expanded explanation of the operational and financial results for the year. There really weren't any significant changes in your footnotes this year, so unless anybody has any specific questions, I won't go into those in detail. As part of your audit, there were 2 compliance reports that we also issued. The first of which is your single audit report. Again, this is a compliance report that is required when an entity has over $750,000 in federal expenditures for the year. And you all had a little over $5 million of those expenditures this year. As was the case with the financial audit, we are issuing a clean or unmodified opinion on the single audit. The second compliance report is the Yellow Book report, and that is a report on the county's internal control and its compliance with laws and regulations. We did have 4 audit findings reported to you all this year, 2 of which pertain to the financial audit and 2 pertain to the single audit. I went over those in detail with the Finance Committee last year. I'll be happy to do so with you all if you wish. But if anybody would like to read those findings in detail, they begin on page 189 of the financial statements. But again, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, this was a unique year. And in my mind, these findings are really just simply a reflection of the circumstances and not of the staff. Whitney and I have spoken at length, and she's already in the process of correcting these issues going forward. I tell you, Whitney's been great to work with. She's been very proactive, not reactive. She's really taken the bull by the horns to ensure that these items get corrected. So, again, if I'm in your shoes, I wouldn't be overly concerned about these. I see these findings as being a one-time issue, and I don't anticipate these being recurring in nature in future years. One final item to discuss is certain information about the audit that auditing standards require that we communicate to you all. But again, the county has received a clean opinion with the financial audit and the single audit. We had no difficulties in dealing with management. We had no disagreements with management. We had no uncorrected misstatements. And again, we are independent of the county as required by governmental auditing standards. And with that concludes my presentation. As I mentioned earlier, there's quite a bit of information in this report. What I've tried to do is just hit the highlights of what I think is the most important to you all. But if there's anything that I didn't touch on that you all have questions about, please don't hesitate to ask. But again, I just want to thank your staff for their hard work this year. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to be a service to the county, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you very much, David. Are there any comments before we move on? Mr. Somerville.
Thank you, sir. A couple of quick questions. One has to do with the sales tax. The ratio is 1,000 to 1 there between 2019 and 2020. I'm sure there's an explanation for that.
Yes, sir. This is Whitney. I can answer that. The referendum was in the prior year, and collections didn't start until the fiscal 20 year. So that is why you really see very little of that in the prior year and the bulk of it in fiscal 20.
I'll have to speak to you offline about that one. The other question is on airports. The grants were approximately even between 2019 and 2020, but the expenditures were vastly different. I think 3 to 1 on Ladies Island and probably 2.5 to 1 on Hilton Head. Is that simply spending grants from previous years?
Correct. That's just a result of timing differences of when those funds were expended.
That answer your question, Paul?
I'll talk to him offline.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? It was a very nice presentation. Having done this in my prior career, the MD&A is a significant document. It is well worth your reading. It's actually the story of the county. It tells where we have been and where we're going. And so I encourage everyone at least to read that. So thank you very much. Okay, we're now at citizen comments. Do we have anybody online to make a comment? Because I do not see anybody in the audience, unless, Joe, you wish to make a comment? Okay, seeing no comment from Joe.
No, sir, we don't have anyone online.
Okay, we will close the citizen comments. We are at the liaison and committee reports. The Finance Committee and Public Facilities Committee do have the consent agenda items, so we'll have them go over those and any other reports that we need. So we'll begin with the Finance Committee that has one item.
only one item this evening. That is a resolution for acceptance of a grant award to Beaufort County Sheriff's Office. And then also want to let everyone know that we have our final administrators workshop that's going to be on May 6th at 10 o'clock.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Rodman, you have a series of items for the consent agenda.
Well, Jared's been a busy boy pushing a lot of stuff through. Just to run through them quickly, and these all came out of committee unanimously. Item 2 has to do with utility easements, which we see from time to time on property that we own, but we grant an easement for the benefit of other folks, typically Beaufort, Jasper, and the water. Item number 3 is a resurfacing. And we have a 5-year plan, and I believe this is the 4th year, and it's for $400,000. Item number 4 is part of the, I believe, the sales tax activities, excluding the 278 corridor. So this would be relative to the pathways and the work on Ladies Island. So it's the construction, engineering, and inspection services. It's $3.3 million. So it comes out of the sales tax funds. Item number 5 is the earthwork and site utilities at the Myrtle Business Park in Bluffton, and that's part of ongoing development of that particular site where we're adding buildings. Number 6 is an intergovernment agreement with the town of Yemassee, where we can provide certain services for them. We have done this with other municipalities, just because we have the wherewithal to help them in some cases where they might not have that particular specialty in-house. Number 7 is a request for qualification. And it has to do with the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and they've selected a vendor to do that. Being a request for qualification, it wouldn't necessarily have a hard dollar amount, and the individual, the firm selected, is based on their qualifications. Item number 8 is a lease agreement update with Stoneworks. And it's a kind of a minor adjustment, and essentially there's some minor revenue that we're not receiving now. Item number 9 is 1.5 million and change for upgrading the HVAC and the energy management system for the detention center, part of an overall upgrade of that facility. Item number 10 is a lease agreement with the school district. Has to do with the Lobico Library, and it's really extending something that's been in place now. There was some discussion about whether it'd be a new lease or an amendment, but the lawyers have agreed that it would be an amendment to the current agreement. And number 11 is the appointment of Bruce Klein to the Construction Adjustment and Appeals Board, with that being his 4th term, which would expire 4 years from now. And being a 4th term, Mr. Chairman, that would require 11 positive votes to get that done. So that is the consent agenda. 1 or 2 items to talk about from just the committee perspective. We did have a conversation about the possibility of a referendum, a new referendum relative to road projects. And the sense of the committee was that we do need to at least move forward on that. You know, with the planning, we're probably at the point where we need to make some decisions if we're going to do that in 2022. And to that end, probably the next step will be to convene the Beaufort County Transportation Advisory Group, which is made up of the mayors, a couple of the council folks, the sheriff, and the chairman of the County Transportation Committee, and they can weigh in on the work that the staff has been doing. The staff has received input from the municipalities. So we'll be starting with a potential list. It's interesting, Jared's coined the term the Beaufort billion, because that's the number we're looking at in total roads. Now, obviously, all of that doesn't go through referendum. There's impact fees, hopefully get some money from the state. There's a variety of different things that it comes to. But as you look at it, the number seems to be so large that it's hard to imagine being able to accomplish this by that is over 10 years, by the way, without some, certainly some referendums. I think the second comment is that with the report we just received on the 278 piece, which I think is coming along nicely. We still have several years before the project is completed, and we probably need to be sitting with the town and taking a look as to what short-term projects could be undertaken to either relieve the congestion and improve the safety, because it's getting worse with every passing day. So in any event, Mr. Chairman, those are the updates from the committee and the consent agenda.
Ms. Howard.
Yes, sir. I wanted to give a short report on the TCL Area Commission meeting, which was April 20th. Virtually, the good news is even compared to 2019, enrollment is up for the summer 4% and for the fall 6%. So that's good news for TCL. This summer they're going to offer dual enrollment classes for high school students. And the Culinary Institute building construction is going well. The windows are to go in probably in May. And then there's renovation work to be done on the campus north of the Broad, buildings 2, 4, 6, and 8. The work will start on that. The TCL is looking at adding a pharmacy technician program. And the other news is the students that were in the medical fields, which were having trouble getting their clinicals because of the COVID, have now finished them. So that is the good news. Dr. Tim Hardy, who is with the president of the state, South Carolina Technical College program, said he had some good news. Lottery receipts are higher, and that means there's more opportunities for students to go to school free, and they expect to have money from the state legislators to take care of buildings, perhaps more than they've had in the past.
Thank you very much. Is there any other comments from any member of council? Mr. Herbachon, you're first, and then Mr. McKellen.
Thank you. I've got a question about number 5 on the consent agenda. So would you prefer that I ask the question, or would you prefer that I make a motion to take that separately?
Why don't you ask the question, because we did discuss this before.
Yeah, so the question is, we've got an agreement to sell that property. Is the site work part of that agreement? And is this something that the taxpayer should be paying for? Or should that be the purchaser of the property?
I'll defer to Jared on that.
Jared, did you hear that question?
Yes, sir, and I can answer that question. So as part of the development, there are $577,000 in utility tax credits that are being applied from the co-op towards the projects. That is the funding mechanism, the funds that will be paying for the site work. And in order to facilitate those funds, it has to run through the county. So the county has to do the work and then funnel the tax credits to apply towards the project. It is not additional funding from general fund.
Got it. Were those the tax credits from Palmetto Electric? Yes. Got it. Okay. Thank you. I'm good.
Okay, that answers your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Any, Mr. McKellen, you had a question.
The May 3rd Community Services Public Safety Committee meeting will not be held in May. I'm going to ask in a conversation with Mr. Greenway to just at his next administrator's report to include the update on the distance learning grants that have been made since the first report was made. And I've asked Mr. Foote to make a presentation at the June meeting with regard to the operations of the detention center. So there will be no May meeting, but there will be agenda items already in development for the June meeting.
Great, thank you. Any others? Seeing none, we are now ready to conduct public hearings and action items. Our first item, Mr. Glover.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I think it would be appropriate at this point to move the consent agenda. I don't see anywhere else, and we've just got done talking about everything. So I'll make a motion if it's appropriate to, if it can be accepted, to approve the consent agenda.
You so can move.
I'll second.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, hold on a
I
second.
don't-
It's been duly
Yes.
moved and seconded. Are there any questions? Mr. Glover?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a problem with item number 6, but just wanted to have a concern at this time that I'm just wondering, with all the projects that we have in the county, whether we're putting a lot of undue burden on our engineering division, and that's just a concern. They're bringing it forward, so I'm going to support it, but I just want to put that on record that I do have some concerns that we may be overloading our engineering department. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before we vote? Duly motioned and seconded. This will be done without objection for the entire consent agenda, items 1 through 11. I see no objections. Therefore, the consent agenda, items 1 through 11, are approved as stated. We move on to item number 13, which is the acceptance of the fiscal year 2020 comprehensive annual financial report and the corrective action plan. May I have a motion for that item, please?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Mr. Somerville makes the motion and Mr. Lawson makes the second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, this item will be approved without any objections. Looking, I see no objections, therefore item number 13 is approved. Item number 14. We'll need a motion for the consideration of authorization to proceed with design and permitting of South Carolina 170 improvements between 278 and 462 on an expedited basis, not to exceed $300,000. May I have such a motion?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rodman makes the motion.
Second.
Mr. Somerville makes the second. Discussion.
I could give a little background if that's useful.
Well, wait a second.
Okay.
Before you do the discussion, I see, all right, go ahead. You'll be first.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, just the background on this. LATS had commissioned a study not too long ago to look at this particular area. It's probably one of the most congested areas of the roads in the county, and came back with really 3 time phases, one which is the long term, one medium term, and one short term. The long term is on the order of $70 to $80 million with all the growth that's going on there, and the short term was $3 million, had 4 projects as part of it. One of the 4 has already been done, which is the traffic signal at 462. Proposal, and keep in mind, this would still come back to council for approval for the dollars when they have a contract. But the thought process is that this is so urgent, we ought to get on with it. This is really council saying, yes, we acknowledge this is something we ought to do. To put it in perspective of what's happening there, let me just read you from the report that was put together from the overall project of that section. It says there were 439 crashes along the 170 study corridor over a 3.5-year period, with 5 of those resulting in fatalities. Of these, 439 or 43% occurred between 278 Palmer Grace Drive. It's really the 3/4 of a mile section of 170 north of 278. And the thought process is there'd be 2 advantages to this by getting on with it, in addition to just solving the problem, is that I think it'll give an opportunity to dialogue with Jasper in the South Carolina on who ought to pay the construction costs, and I think we would expect that there would be other parties, not just ourselves. And secondly, this would be an area that would clearly make it into the 22 referendum if we end up doing it. And so by actually having engineers and developing it, we'll probably learn some things relative to fine-tuning that particular potential project. So I think it makes sense to move it forward, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? I see no other questions. It's been duly motioned and second. This will be done without objection. Are there any objections? Mr. Llewellyn, I hear you.
Voice vote, please.
A voice vote? Okay.
Yes, I would too.
All right. It has been duly motioned and second. Mr. Rodman, we'll begin with you.
Yes.
Mr. Somerville, you were second.
Yes.
Mr. Cunningham.
Yes.
Mr. Dawson.
Yes.
Mr. Llewellyn.
No.
Mr. Glover.
No.
Mr. Hervishon.
Yes.
Ms. Howard.
Yes.
Mr. Lawson.
Mark Lawson, yes.
Mr. McKellen.
Yes.
The chair votes yes. There are 9 yes, 2 no. The motion is approved. Item number 15, I'm seeking a motion to approve us entering into a lawsuit against the online short-term rental companies.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Ms. Howard makes the motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Cunningham makes the second. Questions? Mr. Hervishon.
Is it possible to state exactly which companies we're talking about?
These are the short-term rental companies like Airbnb, Verbo. Those are the kinds of companies that are being part of this class action suit.
Understood. Is those two or are there others?
Oh, there are others. Those are the 2 majors, but it is every single one. Mr. Greenway, certainly you can weigh in.
Yeah, I don't know that we know at this point. We're going to have to do that research, and if we determine that people are not submitting the required documentation on a tax and business license and things like that, then that'll be a part of it. Our county attorney, Mr. Taylor, might want to elaborate further still, but I don't think we have a good answer on how many companies are involved at this point.
So this is basically a blanket motion to allow us to enter into into legal action with any sort of short-term.
Well, the attorneys are going to put together the case and tell us who we need to take action against. Yeah.
Right.
Does I understand that right, Clerk?
Yes, that's correct. And it is the standard, as Mr. Passman said, it's the companies that we all know. And by the way, I would say it's not a class action. That would be a different type of lawsuit. This is simply a multiple defendant lawsuit.
Correct. Okay. Mr. Cunningham.
What other municipalities or close areas around us have joined in this lawsuit?
Hilton Head has the Myrtle Beach, Horry County, Charleston County, Richland County. I'm not sure if Bluffton or Beaufort have pursued it.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, will we require a roll call vote on this? Is anyone going to object to this? I see no objections. Therefore, this will be approved without any objections. Seeing none, item number 15 has been approved. Item number 16, may I have a motion for a public hearing and 3rd reading of an ordinance to use $5 million in fund balance to defease bonds.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Lawson makes the motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Dawson makes the second. Okay. Any comments?
Mr. Chairman, I just got one quick comment.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm supporting this, so that's not even a question. But the fund balance is a good resource that has been growing for us, and we need to really it's coming from taxpayers, and we need to really give some type of relief to our taxpayers. This is one way of doing it. Hoping that we are not anticipating issuing more bonds of indebtedness, but also at some point in time, trying to use our fund balance, even as we talk about next year's budget, to kind of reduce the tax burden on our citizens. I'm really concerned about the taxes that are being assessed right now to our citizens. Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing no other comments, this will be done without, oh, I'm sorry, it is a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who is online or in person to make comments regarding this ordinance?
Yes, sir, there is that.
Okay, so we've met the public hearing requirement. That portion is closed. This will be done without objection then. I see no objections. Therefore, the public hearing and third reading of this ordinance has been approved. Item number 17 is a public hearing and second reading of an ordinance to make permanent the previously adopted emergency resolution allowing for electronic or hybrid meetings and other matters related thereto. May I have a motion, please?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Glover makes the motion.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McKellen makes the second. Okay, is there anybody from the public, either in chambers or online, who wishes to comment regarding this item?
Yes, sir, there is that.
Okay, the public hearing portion has been satisfied. Is there any member of council who wishes to make a comment before we vote? Mr. Cunningham.
I know we've discussed this before and I brought it up last time, and I'm really trying to find middle ground on this with all of council. Again, the thing that doesn't sit well with me is having county council meetings being able to be virtual for our council members. So I'm going to move again that we exclude county council meetings from this ordinance and just leave it to our committees, boards, meetings.
So you're asking for an amendment?
I'd move for the amendment, yes, sir.
Okay. Is there a second to his amendment?
I'll second the amendment, sir.
Mr. Flewelling makes the second. Discussion on that.
Just a clarification.
Yes.
I believe what you're suggesting would be just for the county council meetings itself, does not apply to the committee meetings of council.
Correct.
Correct, okay.
Or boards or commissions.
Board, yeah.
Any comments?
I have a comment, Mr.
Go ahead, Mr. McKellen.
So this amendment would prevent people who are unavoidably detained or unavailable to attend a meeting, would remove their right to vote on matters coming before this body simply because they can't be there. But if we have this virtual authority, everyone, regardless of the reason that they're unavailable, will have an opportunity to express their opinion and cast a vote. A great many people may find that they have to be out of town, they have a family emergency, that something would prevent them from being in the chamber. And this amendment would prevent all of the members of the body who have to be absent for another reason from being able to vote on matters of great importance to the citizens and to the members themselves. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to be clear on that we're trying to exclude people from having an opportunity to vote.
Okay. Any other comments? Mr. Harvishon.
Clarification, does that include caucus?
Since caucus is part of the public council meeting, the answer to that would be yes.
Okay, very good. I'm going to support this. I think it's appropriate. I think the public's business should be done in public. I think we all signed up for this job. We all signed up to be here. We all ran for it. We should be here. I think it's that simple.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments?
I have one.
I do.
Mr. Somerville.
Yeah, I mean, this is a self-serving comment, but I think each one of the 11 of us has a right to make a self-serving comment. for a number of years, I do travel a lot in my business. And my options have been either A, to miss the meeting and not vote, or B, to forego the revenue and make the client mad and not be present when they want me present on site and be here, which I have elected to do numerous times since I've been on council. I signed up for this, but this is a great opportunity to give me personally some relief to earn a living and support my family.
Okay. Mr. Lawson.
Yes, I will vote against the amendment and like to go back to the original ordinance. And with that being said, I'm planning on coming to every meeting, and it's up to me to decide if I'm coming to the meeting or not. And as Mr. McKellen eloquently said, you know, there are circumstances that do allow people or have people that miss meetings, whether it's due to COVID, whether it's due to illness, whether it's due to something else. And by allowing us to have the meetings be virtual, it actually makes it better for transparency because everyone will be here then, everyone will get a chance to participate. I've seen in the past where because of a certain council person not being there, that the vote goes a different way than what it should go for if the whole council was there. So again, I'd like to give everyone the opportunity to be at every meeting, again, to represent their people as best they can.
Final comment.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Glover. Go ahead, Mr. Glover.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought somebody else had the floor. I'm like Mr. Lawson. I'm going to vote against this. I think that having the flexibility of being in person, that I do plan to be in person. At some point in time, I'm still have a little reservation simply because of my age right now. Even though I've gotten my vaccination, etc., I'm still wavering right now whether I should be there. But at some point in time, this COVID issue will be behind us, and I will make my presence there in chamber. But at the same time, I think we have technology that will allow us to be at our meetings if we are not present in person. We can be present by virtual, and I think to not use and utilize that technology would put us will make us look like we are not embracing the new era. And I think we have that at this time, and we could use it. So I'm going to support being able to use the hybrid system going forward. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Howard, you'll go next, then Mr. Rodman,
Yes.
and Mr. Cunningham, and we'll call for a vote.
Mr.
Go ahead.
Chairman, I'm going to vote against the amendment. I think we have entered a new era of technology. I think this will provide a way for a council member that under some health conditions or other reasons unknown to us can still participate and vote be counted. I plan on being here from now on. I've been vaccinated, but I think this is an opportunity for council members to have their vote counted. Thank you.
Mr. Rodman.
I'll support the amendment, and partially because I look to, you know, in Washington and in Columbia with the General Assembly, I don't believe they allow people to vote that are not there. And we have much shorter distance to deal with.
Mr. Cunningham?
Yeah, I'll focus my comment at two things. One, directly towards Mr. McKellen's response of excluding votes. In no way does this amendment exclude a vote. We have 24 meetings a year inside this council. That agenda and schedule has already been published. Very few and far between would it be an emergency for someone not to be here. Currently, we have an emergency ordinance in place that allows you to be virtual no matter whether this passes or not, which Mr. Lawson expressed last meeting. So to twist the words the way you did to say that it excluded a vote and make the chairman answer that with a yes or no is inaccurate. Secondly, to Mr. Somerville, I completely understand with you. I gave up money to do this job. I used to work every Monday for 9 years. I also quit my other job so I could run the campaign to do it. I knew what it entailed. My family knew what it entailed. And, you know, I'm a public servant. I'm here to work for the people just like every single one of us. And I think I should be here in person working for them as long as that can be done safely. That's currently why I voted for the extension of the emergency ordinance last time, to maintain that could happen until that time could be. But to allow it to be something permanent is something I think you guys should desperately reconsider.
Okay, we're ready for the vote. Mr. Cunningham, everybody understands the amendment is to remove the caucus and council meeting from the ability to have online participation. You could still participate for committee meetings, and our boards and commissions could do that, but county council could not have attendance virtually for caucus or council meetings. Mr. Cunningham, you made the amended motion. You got to go first.
Yes.
Mr. Flewelling, you were second.
Yes.
Mr. Dawson.
Yes.
Mr. Glover.
No.
Mr. Hervishon.
Yes.
Ms. Howard.
No.
Mr. Lawson.
Mark Lawson, no.
Mr. McKellen.
No.
Mr. Rodman.
Yes.
Mr. Somerville.
No.
Chair votes no. The yeses are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yes. The noes are 6. The motion is defeated. We're back to the original motion. The original motion was moved by Mr. Glover, seconded by Mr. McKellen. Is there any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Glover.
Yes.
Mr. McKellen.
Yes.
Mr. Cunningham.
No.
Mr. Dawson.
Yes.
Mr. Flewelling.
Yes.
Mr. Hervishon.
No.
Ms. Howard.
Yes.
Mr. Lawson.
Mark Lawson, yes.
Mr. Rodman.
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Somerville.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. We have 9 yes and 2 no. The motion is successful. Item number 18 is a public hearing and second reading of an ordinance to call for a referendum to allow the qualified electors of Beaufort County, South Carolina, to vote to retain the council administrator form of government or change to the council manager form of government. May I have such a motion, please?
So moved.
Mr. Somerville makes the motion. A second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McKellen makes the second. Discussion. Mr. Hervishon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am not going to support this again. I continue to be concerned with a consolidation of power at the county level. I think this is just probably one more step toward that. I think it's also a gross overreaction to an issue that we have with basically one elected official. I think the voters can take care of that in the next election cycle. And frankly, I think it's up to our political parties to help them do that by putting up qualified candidates. So I just don't think that we need to get involved with this. I think the voters should decide on who they want their treasurer and their auditor to be, and I'm not going to support it.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to support this motion simply because I think it's been discussed around the table, and it's been an issue ever since I got on council. And I think the citizens need to debate this and decide their form of government. Thanks.
Okay. Any other comments before we go to the public? If there's any public comments. Mr. Rodman.
I'm highly in favor of doing this, but very much opposed to trying to push this through this year. 6 months from now, because I don't think it's one of those things we can keep going back to the public. I think we get one more bite at this apple. And my thought process is that if we're looking at doing something in the next couple of months, that we really haven't given an explanation to the people. I think there'll be more opposition than support in the community. Clearly, I think there'll be groups, maybe like the teachers, that'll say, hey, we don't want the county, controlling our funds. There'll be confusion over the audit. And if we have an auditor, but in reality, the auditor doesn't do any auditing. We use an outside firm just like we had come and do this. But that's a confusing issue. And even the name is confusing. Are we going to change from an administrator? So we're going to get rid of Eric and then hire a manager. The whole thing is kind of confusing, and I think it's unlikely to pass in the short term. However, if we look out to 2022 and keep in mind that regardless of which year we did the referendum, those two individuals would serve until June of 23. So even if we passed it this year, they would still have 20 months to serve out their term. And I think the way to go about this is to have a commission of some sort that we put together that advises us. Perhaps there's some studies that get made, seeing what other people are doing. What are good financial practices, and putting to bed the issue of what the auditor does and doesn't do. I would hope that given time that Maria, who does a great job, might actually see that this is something that makes sense, and there would probably be some expanded responsibilities for her. I think having some kind of an investment advisory board, because at any point in time they're sitting on $300, $400, $500 million, would make some sense. Actually, the Treasury is the largest bank in Beaufort County that we have. And it's very much an invisible job unless something goes wrong. And back when we did it the first time, we had the issue of the embezzlement. And then recently we've been dealing with the issue of the tax bills. But I don't think those alone are the reason to change this. I think it really comes down to what is good, sound fiscal policy that we want to go through. And at the end of the day, we have two choices. You can hire somebody that's a professional for a very sophisticated job, or you can hire somebody for 4 years, and the only qualification is 21 and being a registered voter. So I'm going to vote against doing it in 21, but I'm a very big advocate of taking our time and doing it properly in 22, because I think we could pass it if we explained it to the public. I don't think that we can pass it if we just push this out there in the next couple months, particularly coming off of COVID. I don't know how you get people out, citizens groups, to put something together in the short term.
Any other comments? Mr. Cunningham.
Yeah, I think my thing still is with Mr. Rodman. It's a timing thing for me. It's the same thing I struggle with Lost. It's the same thing I struggle with this. Anything we put on this ballot coming up this November, we know we're not going to get the turnout. We've seen it year in before. So if we're going to let the people make a decision, like on a referendum, then we should do it when there is going to be a wide election. If it doesn't affect our treasurer auditor now for the rest of their terms, and there's no reason for us to even rush it to be on the 2021 ballot. We should have the time for 22 ballot to even give it the chance to pass or fail, however the voters feel. So again, I'm going to oppose it because of the timing. I don't think it's the right time to make a move like this if you want the wide variety of public to vote and voice their opinions.
Okay. I'm going to go to the public now. Is there anybody in chambers or online that wishes to make a comment regarding this item?
Yes, sir, there isn't.
Okay, that section is satisfied. We'll call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, before you call a roll, where does it say 21, 20, 22 in this motion? Is it implied that we're talking about 21 election?
Correct. Yes, it's this November.
This November?
That's correct.
Yes, sir, that's written into the ordinance.
Yep. Okay. Mr. Somerville, you made the motion. You vote first.
Yes.
Mr. McKellen,
Yes.
Mr. Cunningham,
No.
Mr. Dawson,
Yes.
Mr. Flewelling,
No.
Mr. Glover,
Yes.
Mr. Hervishon,
No.
Ms. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Lawson,
Mark Lawson, yes.
Mr. Rodman.
No.
Chair votes yes. Therefore, we have 7 yes, 4 no. The motion is successful. Item number 19, a second reading of an ordinance to levy and impose a 1% local option sales and use tax within Beaufort County, South Carolina, pursuant to Section 4-10-10 et sec. Of the South Carolina Code of Laws, 1976, as amended to define the specific purpose of the tax, to impose conditions and restrictions upon the use of the proceeds of the tax, to provide for a countywide referendum for the imposition of the tax, to provide for the conduct of such referendum, to provide for the administration of the tax, and other matters relating thereto. May I have such a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for the local option sales tax.
Ms. Howard makes the motion. May I have a second, please?
I'll second it.
Mr. Lawson makes the second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment.
Yes.
I represent a district of unincorporated and 2 municipalities. This is a promise, as I've said before, that we made to the municipalities. It's been discussed, gone over for years. I've waited for this for 6 years. I've been on council that long, so I am going to vote, of course, for this.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Hervishon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the mayor's wanting, and the other councils as well, wanting to do this. I think their position is reasonable. I think this is an issue where reasonable people can disagree. But for me, this is a tax that if it gets put on, for all intents and purposes, it will never, ever, 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 ever come off. Just as a practical matter. So I can't support this. I apologize to the various municipalities. I appreciate the position on this, but I can't support it.
Any other comments? Mr. Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I do have a couple of comments. Well, the fact is that the $12 to $15 million that the municipalities and the county will receive for general fund purposes is 100% paid for by non-residents. Actually, a little more than that is paid by non-residents. So what that means is municipalities and the county get, depending on how the sales tax money rolls in year to year, get $12 to $15 million in money paid 100% for by tourists and visitors. The rest of it goes back 100% to property tax abatement, and of course it goes back pro rata depending on how much you pay. So let me talk about taxes. So let me comment on that. For years, we have talked about the criticality of what 388 has done to our 6%ers, particularly our businesses, and to perhaps a somewhat lesser degree to our second homeowners. But guess what's been happening in the last several years? One thing that's happened is you're seeing a large migration of 6%ers to 4%ers. This is particularly true with people that have owned second homes for a long time, and they start comparing their tax bill in South Carolina and Beaufort County with what they're paying in Connecticut or Michigan or wherever they're from. And they've decided that all of a sudden Beaufort is their primary residence, and it's because of this 388 disaster that's created for second homeowners and businesses as paying 6%. And 6% is misleading because it's not just 4 to 6%. All of a sudden, if you're a 6%er, you're paying school operating tax as well. And this really hurts renters because as a landlord, obviously you pass this on to your tenants. So there are a million reasons, or there are many reasons why I'm going to support this, but I can't honestly see a reason to not support it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Any other comments? Mr. Lawson?
First of all, I'd like to make a motion to extend past the 8 o'clock hour.
Oh, okay.
I'll second.
Motioned and seconded to extend past the 8 o'clock hour. Didn't realize. Thank you for the time.
That was Sarah over here on my left.
Okay.
I can't take credit for that.
Is there any objection to going past the 8 o'clock hour to finish the business at hand? I see no objections. Therefore, the extension of the meeting past the 8 o'clock hour will pass. Thank you very much. Back to you.
And then my comments on this is obviously, yes, we do this in support of the municipalities. And again, it's something that's why we're putting it on the ballot, is so the voters can decide. It's something that they will choose. If municipalities are for this, well, then it's going to be them to get the word out of why it's good. I'm sure we'll have some people come out and tell us why it's bad. The Allen Packet will do their stories that will then tell us what they think about it. But again, it gives the people the choice, and they could very easily vote it down if they choose to do that, which they've done before. So again, I feel like I'm doing my part by voting for it and supporting municipalities and getting it on the agenda for that vote.
Okay. Mr. Cunningham, did you have a
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I struggle with it being on this November ballot. And that's in the ordinance as well, that they want to put on November 21. We're not going to get the voters out. It's not going to be the voice of the entire Beaufort County the way it should be. I've already reached out to the mayors to set up meetings. That's on my agenda to do. Some of the struggles I still have, it hurts your lower income families the most. And I had people say that's any property you own. So you get a kickback on your car, you get a kickback on things like that. But $20 off my property tax of my vehicle, that's $80, is nothing compared to the person that's going to get on their $2,000 property tax on their house. It's not comparable. And not to mention that a lot of those people are renting, so they don't get that kickback. We know the people that are landlords are not going to trickle down that discount. It's just not going to happen. I do struggle with those things. I'd be willing to put it or entertain the idea of putting on a ballot to give the people's voice, whether I agree with the lost or not, if you actually were having a significant election. But this November is not. So again, I'm going to vote against lost.
Okay. Any other comments before we vote?
Yes.
Mr. Rodman?
Just a correction. My take on who pays is it's about 1/3 for the visitors and about 2/3 for the locals that live here. Because generally the second homeowners are not necessarily here a great portion of the time. Secondly, it's always been stated that municipalities don't have another way to raise capital. Well, of course they do. They can go to referendum just like we do. Hilton Head does it anytime. And that's actually less regressive for the people inside the municipalities because, again, that would be property tax based, not on a base. But I'm going to vote against this. I think this is regressive on the people that can least afford it. I think it's a tax benefit for the people that least need it. The municipalities are 40% of the population. We certainly have a say because we represent 60% of the people as to whether this ought to be. To Chris's point, this is a forever. There's no practical way that you'd ever take it off. So this is a forever. But my biggest concern is that I think we're going to need to do the penny transportation tax in order to work through this massive bow wave of projects that we have facing us and the massive growth that's coming to our county. So we're not really talking about a penny. We're really talking about, do we want 2 pennies, one for lost and one for transportation. So for those reasons and others stated, I'm going to vote against it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Dawson?
Yeah, I'm not a proponent of supporting this agenda item. However, the municipalities have asked us repeatedly if we would just give the public the opportunity to make the decision as to whether they want to pay this 1 cent tax of sales or not. So even though I don't support it, I'm going to oblige the municipalities and vote to put it on the ballot to allow the citizens to make the decision. But I personally, I don't support it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Does anybody know the percentage of this revenue that will go towards our roads or our schools?
There's no way of knowing it till we collect the actual tax. There's a 71-29.
Right.
71% goes to tax relief.
Correct.
29% goes to various projects around the county that will be developed by the individual municipalities and the county.
So would it be safe to say that'd be very minimal that would actually go towards our schools or our roads because they would be able to dictate the projects that they use it towards?
Joe?
I'm genuinely asking. I'm not sure. I'm asking.
My take on the numbers is they go out distributed on a population basis. The municipalities in total would get back about 10 cents on the dollar, and the county would get back roughly, I think, 15 cents on the dollar. I believe the money is unrestricted the way you can use it, whether it's capital or operating. I'm not as sure if there's any restrictions on it.
Right.
Okay.
And the school district has a funding source that we don't have. They can go out for referendum for capital. They did that recently. Mr. Hervishon, did you have a?
No, I'm good.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, Mr. McKellen.
I understand that the lost tax does not tax essential items. Is anyone able to articulate for me examples of what essential items are that would not be taxed?
Food.
Drugs and food.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that because I did want to make a comment. There was an article in the packet recently that talked about, among other things, it talked about lost. And it either said or implied, I don't have the article in front of me, that the tax applied to everything. And I don't believe that's correct. But while we're talking to the public, it's my understanding that it excludes medicines, for example, and food. Am I right about that or am I wrong?
You're correct.
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
That's right.
Yeah.
So we have medicine and food. Is anyone able to articulate any more essential items that this tax will not be collected on?
Correct. I mean, that speaks to the, at least partially to the argument about regressiveness. I think if you tax medicine and food for low-income people, I think that would be a problem. So anyway, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, we probably can't give you a comprehensive list tonight, Councilmember McKellen, but we will be glad to do that and email it out to council tomorrow.
Well, I was more concerned with getting some information to the people who are watching this on television tonight on what would be exempt from this tax, because I think that's an important consideration as we're trying to vote whether or not we want to see this go on a referendum for the citizens to consider. However, if it's unavailable, well, then that's just the way it'll have to be.
Well, this is only the second reading. We have one more reading of this before it is completed. So we'll have that information.
But we're sure food and medicine are exempt, no tax collected there. So if people go to a grocery store to get food for their family, those items are not taxed.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Alice, you made the motion. You get to vote first.
Yes.
The second was Mr. Lawson.
Mark Lawson, yes.
Mr. Cunningham.
No.
Mr. Dawson.
Yes.
Mr. Flewelling.
Yes.
Mr. Glover.
Yes.
Mr. Hervishon.
No.
Mr. McKellen.
Yes.
Mr. Rodman.
No.
Mr. Somerville.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Therefore, the vote is 8 yes, 3 no. Motion is successful. Item number 20 is a second reading of an ordinance as amended authorizing the execution and delivery of an SSRC, which is called a Special Source Revenue Credit, by and between Beaufort County, South Carolina, and Project Burger, providing for a payment in lieu of taxes and other matters related thereto. May I have such a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Somerville makes the motion. A second, please.
Second.
Ms. Howard makes the second. Discussion. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, were we not going to get some clarification on what an SSRC is versus a?
As a matter of fact, we have an expert in the audience.
I thought we did.
Mr. O'Toole, would you please come and explain the difference between an SSRC and a FELO?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Council. I think your meetings would be shorter if you sat in the seat I've been sitting in. I'm amazed I could walk. As you know, we had just a lighthearted moment. I appreciate the work you're doing. We had HSB, Haineswork, St. Clair Boyd did a presentation for council, and I apologize for the newer council members who weren't there, but it was very well done. HSB has been working with county's legal attorney, Kurt Taylor, and we have basically, as you recall at the first reading, these companies, due to tax filings, their investment somehow, through their real estate, their equipment, and so on, falls below the threshold for a FELO. For Beaufort County to diversify its economy, we want to bring the manufacturer's tax rate, down to that 6%, like every other county does using the FELOs. When the investments fall below a certain level, 2.5 million, you use the SSRC to accomplish the same feat of bringing that tax rate from 10.5% to 6% for their real estate and their equipment. So it just allows Beaufort County, to provide a nice welcome and be on even footing with whether it's Jasper County or Hampton County or any of the other 49 counties in South Carolina.
Does that answer your question, sir?
It does, and I just would add that I believe that this is just another way, which we have to do to get around the state requirement that there be a 10% tax, which just shouldn't be there in the first place. And nobody that I know disagrees with that. So what we have to do is we have to wrap ourselves around the axle with things like this to avoid telling people that have a 10% tax on their inventory, which would simply drive them to Tennessee or North Carolina or Georgia or Florida or wherever. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing no other questions, we will do this by and between Beaufort County, South Carolina, and Project Garden, providing for a payment payment of a fee in lieu of taxes and other matters related thereto. May I have such a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dawson makes the motion and Mr. Lawson makes the second. Any discussion about this one, now that we know what an SSRC is versus a FELO? Seeing no comments, this will be approved without objection. And we still have the same 46 counties for this one too. So the item is approved without objection. Item number 22 is a first reading of an ordinance amending ordinance number 2020/19, which established the Solid Waste and Recycling Enterprise Fund. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Rodman makes the motion. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Glover makes the second. Discussion.
Could we have some clarification for the public on just what this means?
Yes, Mr. Rodman?
Yeah, let me try if I can. Essentially, we had the consulting studies when we set up the enterprise fund, and the number that they were looking at that point was about $16 million, but it included some things like capital and contingencies that were beyond what we're currently spending. As we went forward, we were talking, and I think at our last meeting, more in the range of 10 million as the going in number. And the advice of council was not to make it a uniform fee, but to actually switch it to a millage. So essentially it's taking money out of the general fund millage and having a parallel millage. The discussion centered on is it 10 or 11? And the 10 is probably close to what we were doing, but with the COVID and all, we didn't really put much into the capital. So the thought was that the 11 would be the right number. And so essentially the millage would be calculated by Whitney by taking the 11, if you will, and dividing by the mill value. And it's probably going to come out someplace between 5 and 5.5. But everybody understands that it needs to be neutral, cost neutral. So we're really just talking about transferring some out of the general fund. And the process would be to actually have an amendment to the ordinance that put the enterprise fund in place. It would be, I think as we get to second reading, Whitney can give us an exact number, and this would be going forward in parallel with the budget anyway. So if we see something that we need to tweak it a little bit up or down, we can certainly do that. But the intent is to hold the combined millage constant.
Mr. Taylor, you want to weigh in?
Yes, sir. I apologize for the confusion on this, but let me explain what this ordinance does. This ordinance is amending the ordinance that was adopted last year that established the enterprise fund. Last year, it was thought that the enterprise fund would be paid for through a user fee. So that's the way that ordinance was set up. Since council has decided to go with millage, we needed to go back to that ordinance from a year ago and tweak it to allow for millage. And then frankly, it's written broadly so that in the future, council could choose to change to a fee or add a fee or something of that nature. But what we're not doing with this ordinance is establishing that millage. The user fee ordinance that was going forward in parallel is no longer necessary. It's moot, frankly, by the change from user fee to millage. I think what we are doing with regard to establishing what the millage is was what Eric asked council for last Friday in the budget workshop, which was to give some guidance. So ultimately, the millage that will be chosen will be just simply attached to the budget. What this ordinance does, again, is amends last year's ordinance to allow for millage rather than a fee.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Lawson.
Just one comment that as we establish this fund, we're already paying for this out of our general fund. This is monies that we're already spending for solid waste. We're going to take it and put it into the fund that handles solid waste. And that actually allows it to be more transparent because then we can track exactly what's being spent for solid waste, which we know those costs are going out of hand and going up every year. So again, to make it something that we are certain what we're doing, it can be then shown to the public and be part of just that one fund that's going to have the solid waste. So again, I just want to clarify that up, let everyone know this is not a new tax. It's something we're paying for already. We're just changing it so it's more transparent.
Yep. Okay, does everybody understand the essence of what we are voting on?
Yes.
Okay.
If I might, Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
One quick
Fulham.
comment. I think, sure, the operative thing that Mr. Lawson just talked about was that we do anticipate prices going up and that this fee, in reality, we know that this part of our budget is about to balloon very quickly. We have some expenses coming up that are beyond the normal range of what we've been paying over the years. We anticipate costs to go up dramatically in the next few years. And this will make it more transparent, more open to the public about why it's going up and why it's necessary for it to go up. And I support this motion. I think it is a good thing.
Okay. Any other comments before we vote? Seeing no other comments, this will be done without objection. Do I see any objections to passing this as written? Seeing no objection, item number 22 has been approved. Next item, number 23, first reading of an ordinance approving the intergovernmental agreements between Beaufort County, Port Royal, and the City of Beaufort regarding Project Burger, Garden, Glass, and Stone. May I have a motion, please, for that?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Flewelling makes the motion. May I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Ms. Howard makes the second. Is there any questions or comments regarding this item? I see no comments, so this will be done without any objections. I do not see any council person objecting, therefore item number 23 is approved. There are no matters that arose out of the executive session. Therefore, we are at the last section of citizen comments. Is there anyone online or in person who wishes to make a comment about tonight's items?
No, sir.
There is nothing. Mr.
Would it be appropriate for me to make a quick comment?
Sure.
Okay. While we're talking about SSRC and FILO, these are methodologies, as has been explained, to reduce the inventory and equipment tax for anyone who wants to come in the county from 10% to 6%. It occurred to me some time ago, and I never did anything about it, but what about the people that have been here for a long time and are paying 10%, which puts them at a huge disadvantage against somebody who comes in fresh? I think at some point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask that we get an update on who those people are and how many of them there are, and start discussing whether we want to try to do something for them as well.
Okay, we can do something like that. Mr. Greenway, you have a comment?
I just wanted to go back to the lost issue real quick. And
yes, sir.
To Councilmember McEllen's earlier question, there are a long list of exemptions in the with regards to sales and use taxes. We will go through that and summarize that, and we will put out a press release and a communication through our online communication system to everyone as to what exactly is exempt from that. There are many categories: governmental related exemptions, business related exemptions, agricultural exemptions, educational exemptions, general public good exemptions, alternative energy exemptions, and then the list underneath all of those categories are very, very broad and lengthy and comprehensive. But we will do our best to summarize that and get a public notice out to the public so they're aware of that, if that is suitable.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that comment. Yes, sir.
And also the packet, if you read that article in the packet last few days, I think your takeaway would be that it's on everything, including food, including medicine, and that's misleading. I don't know that the packet intentionally did that, but I hope that they would want to publish that there are lots of exemptions and it's critical to understanding what they apply to.
Okay.
Just to Paul's point on the 10 and the 6%, on new businesses, we all know we have to do it because the rest of the state does it, otherwise we'll be non-competitive. You raise a very interesting question of the folks that have been here. I think many in the legislature would like to see that changed. Whether they're going to do it or not, I don't know. I haven't done it for a while. I haven't done it before.
Seeing no further business to be conducted by County Council, it is now 8:17 and the meeting is adjourned.